أعزائي المشاهدين، مرحبا بكم في برنامج ديوان الملا. اليوم من داخل السفارة الأمريكية حيكون عندنا لقاء شيق مع سعادة سفيرة الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية بالكويت. معنا اليوم السفيرة ألينا رومانوسكي. راح نتكلم في الكثير من القضايا السياسية وأيضا الشأن المحلي والخارجي. نرحب في سعادة السفيرة.
Well, thank you, Mohammed, for having me here today. I'm very excited and hope all of your viewers are staying safe and healthy.
Thank you very much. راح نبدأ بالسؤال الأول. كونك ممثلة الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية في الكويت، كيف تقيمين العلاقة الأمريكية الكويتية وأيضا لقاءاتك مع صاحب السمو، نسأل الله أن يرجع بالسلامة إلى الكويت؟
Well, first of all, thanks for the question. I want to start first by saying that I want to wish His Highness the Emir a very quick and very prompt recovery. He's getting the best care that the United States can provide, and we really hope that he can return to Kuwait very soon. You asked about the US Kuwaiti relationship. It's a very strong relationship. It's a relationship that is founded on and based on many broad range of issues that we consult about. It has a very strong military cooperation component of it, so that both we and Kuwait can work together on preserving the security of the United States and Kuwait. Our relationship goes back well over 60 years. And frankly, for 70 years, Kuwaitis have been looking at the United States as a destination of choice to study when they look for quality education, just as an example of our deep relationship. We work on issues that include security issues, we work on counterterrorism issues, we work on health issues, we have a U.S. Kuwaiti strategic dialogue that help us frame the relationship that we have and look at how we can strategize about how we can deepen it, et cetera. On political issues, especially in the region, we've been it's been very important for us to work and support His Highness the Emir's efforts in trying to broker the GCC rift. We're very supportive of that, and we certainly hope that there'll be a resolution soon. On economic issues, just last year we had a two-way trade that amounted to about $4.6 billion for just last year, so that's pretty significant. And on, as I said, on military issues, we work very closely together. And next year we're going to have our 30th anniversary of the liberation of Kuwait, which we hope to celebrate with here and with Kuwait. That was a very significant example of the really close, important work that we do together in our partnership.
Good. نسأل السؤال الثاني. اليوم هناك التهديد الإيراني، يعني للولايات المتحدة عدة قواعد، في قواعد بالكويت، في قواعد بالقرب من المنطقة. هل ما زالت الولايات المتحدة ملتزمة بحماية أمن الكويت؟
Look, Mohammed, I think that we see Iran as a significant threat in the region. I think like most Kuwaitis also see that. And we are very committed to Kuwait's security and to the United States security as well. The Iranians have been involved in malign activities in this region for 40 years, and we have been working with our partners, including Kuwait, to push up against the malign activities of the Iranians. Most recently, the Iranians have been engaged in trying to slow and cut off the international maritime trade in the Straits of Hormuz, which is an international waterway that allows at least a fifth of the world's oil to flow through it. They've attacked Saudi oil installations. The Iranians have also attacked our facilities in Iraq. So for us, it's going to be very, they are a threat, and I think we share that also with the Kuwaitis and other regions in the world. We welcomed very much the GCC's letter making it very clear that they also supported the extension of the arms embargo. It was a very clear statement, I think, of GCC unity.
سعادة السفيرة، يمكن القضية اللي تهم الشأن الخليجي هي قضية الأزمة الخليجية الآن، المقاطعة اللي على قطر وما إلى ذلك. ما هي دور المساعي الأمريكية والكويتية لحل هذه الأزمة في هذا الموضوع؟
Well, you know, the Gulf Cooperation Council is a very important framework for supporting and working on regional security and also regional prosperity. And we've been very supportive of a unified GCC for a long time and have worked very closely with the GCC as an entity along with all of the members in the GCC. Unfortunately, our view is that the rift or the disunity has gone on too long. And we need to try to seek a solution. Disunity in the GCC really only serves the interests of our adversaries, and it really does harm the mutual interests of all of our partners in the region. We've been, as I mentioned, I think earlier, very supportive of His Highness the Emir's efforts to try to find a resolution to the GCC rift. We are supportive of that. We also have been working with other members in the GCC to try to find a solution. We hope we will continue to do that. We certainly hope we can find a solution in the near term.
يمكن من المواضيع اللي تهم الصحفيين والإعلاميين هي قضية حرية الصحافة، وأيضا هناك قضية الملكية الفكرية. خلينا نسمع رؤيتك بخصوص هذا الموضوع من ناحية حرية الصحافة والملكية الفكرية.
Well, I think that the freedom of the press is well guaranteed in both the United States Constitution and the Kuwaiti Constitution. It's very important for our two countries, and it's also very important for the citizens and those who live in the United States and Kuwait. We are strong believers in freedom of the press. We're also very aware that there is some frustration among journalists that Kuwait has fallen by probably 20 points over the last decade in its international press freedom standing, and we're really committed to working with journalists and the government to make sure that, you know, Kuwait recovers in its rankings. You know, it's very important that especially in times of crisis like COVID and also in eras where there is misinformation, that journalists can bring fact-based information to the public. It's important, as we have seen in COVID, where they can talk about information that can compromise the health and welfare of citizens by exposing counterfeit goods and other things. So journalists are very, very important in these periods, as you well know, and we support them wholeheartedly in their efforts. And especially in the context of US Kuwaiti relations, we have programs that we have encouraged and opened to Kuwaiti journalists and others in the media field to bring their and share their experiences with others, but also, you know, improve their training and their skill sets in journalism. And that was particularly true with the resurgence of social media, and that's a very important tool. As we know, we're going to be on, we're using it right now. But yes, it is very important. You asked about intellectual property rights, and we recognize that Kuwait has made some very important improvements in intellectual property rights and reached actually a milestone last year when they passed a much stricter law that brought Kuwait much closer to international standards in IPR. And you asked sort of why is IPR so important, because I think sometimes people wonder, what does that really mean, intellectual property rights? Well, it really does ensure that people's ideas, people's creativity, people's inventions are protected and and people can't sort of steal them and borrow them and change them without recognizing who the inventors and who the originators were. So we are, with the new law that Kuwait has passed, I think the next step for Kuwait to continue to improve its ability to combat and to improve intellectual property rights is to enforce the law and make sure that it is. Intellectual property rights and preserving them are very important also for attracting inventors and investors here in Kuwait under the aspirations of the Vision 2035, where Kuwait is looking for international billions of dollars of investors, and that's going to be important to have those kinds of strong laws and regulations for intellectual property. And then finally, we can't forget the artists and we can't forget the musicians. It's very important for them and the creative work that they do to be able to have strong protections for their intellectual property. So that's an important piece of it. Kuwait is well on its way, but can do more things to make sure and to signal that they are as committed to intellectual property rights protection as others in the world.
Good. سعادة السفيرة، يمكن من أهم الملفات اللي اليوم العالم يهتم فيها هي عملية الإرهاب وتمويل الإرهاب. كيف نمنع الإرهاب وكيف نمنع تمويله؟ ولكم تقارير في هذا الموضوع.
Yeah, well, I will say that Kuwait is a very strong counterterrorism partner with the United States, and Kuwait is a regional leader in the global coalition to defeat ISIS. And has been very committed to work with us on counterterrorism issues. We work closely with Kuwait on counterterrorism financing. We want to make sure that Kuwait is not a place where either terrorists can transit their finances or even attack. So it's very important to have strong laws on the books on counterterrorism financing. Kuwait is part of the regional center that's in Saudi Arabia on counterterrorism financing. And the one area that is really critical when you focus on the transfer and the illicit transfer of money is in the area of charitable donations and in charitable organizations, to make sure that that source and that people know that the funds that they are contributing to a charitable organization aren't going to terrorist groups. And that's an area where I think most countries have to remain vigilant and also have the kind of laws that can track that work. But we work closely with the Kuwaiti government on that. We have trained hundreds of Kuwaiti government officials across the various ministries that are involved in counterterrorism financing over the years, and we're going to continue to rely on Kuwait to be a good partner and to work with us on that.
يمكن القضية تهم أيضا العالم وتهم الكويت، قضية الاتجار بالبشر. هذه قضية إنسانية. شنو تقييم وزارة الخارجية عن قضية الاتجار بالبشر خاصة في الكويت؟
Well, first of all, I just want to say from the very top of the question is that the United States is really committed to combating modern slavery and working to combat trafficking in persons. The State Department is required by the Congress to put out a trafficking in persons report every year, where we list recommendations and review the work that the countries have done across the globe in combating trafficking in persons and list recommendations. And Kuwait actually is among the countries that we look at. We cooperate and collaborate with Kuwaitis to get the information and to better understand how Kuwait is dealing with combating trafficking in persons. Some of the recommendations that are in the report, we hope countries, including Kuwait, will incorporate and will look at, because that helps them in improving their standing and also improving it. I will say that the COVID-19 crisis in the context of Kuwait has really, and the journalists also in what they're working, has been able to highlight some of the challenges of both trafficking in persons, but also the challenges that Kuwait faces with the residency, the residency trading. So we also have helped Kuwait look at these issues and helped train some of the lawyers and others who look at trafficking in persons and combating it. I noticed that even today, I think the National Assembly is looking at legislation where we certainly hope that the recommendations that are in the report, some of which include a reform of the kafala system, looking for more investigations and convictions of those who traffic, including Kuwaitis. We hope some of those recommendations are going to be reflected in the legislation. So we will be looking at that. Again, we have a report every year, and we're going to continue to work closely with Kuwait in their efforts to also want to combat trafficking in persons.
سعادة السفيرة، يعني السؤال اليوم التنافس التجاري بين الولايات المتحدة والصين، وخاصة على موضوع ال 5G، وخاصة شركة هواوي الصينية تعتبر منافسة الآن من الشركات الصينية العملاقة اللي تنافس في المنطقة، وأيضا تنافس مثل الشركات الأمريكية أبل وغيرها. يعني ما هو تعليقك على التنافس التجاري خاصة على ال 5G بين الولايات المتحدة والصين؟
Well, Mohammed, let me just say that this is really, the real issue is not about economic competition between the United States and China. It's really about the protection of privacy and the protection of data. Companies like Huawei, under Chinese law, have to provide information to their government's intelligence services. And so when we look at this, we were very concerned about this and ended up basically declaring Huawei a national security risk, a national security threat. In April, Secretary Pompeo announced a clean path initiative that would basically look at companies like Huawei that are untrusted vendors, that would make sure that information going across the telecommunications network would be done on clean companies and clean lines. It's an important initiative for us. The Secretary went on to also talk about encouraging other countries to ban the use of Huawei in their own 5G networks, because again, it's an issue of what you do with the data and of privacy. And as you probably read, Britain just became one of the most recent countries to ban Huawei. They're joining a number of other countries that also have looked at these untrusted vendors, and decided that these are of national security risk for data, et cetera. So it's an issue that really has to do for us with, and for the rest of the world, with what happens to your privacy and what happens to your data, and what happens. How do you keep your national security safe? How do you keep your economic security safe? Your privacy? How do human rights? And when you look at what China does as a country with the data that they can acquire, and they put almost 1 million people in prison or or discriminate against them based on their ethnic and religious backgrounds, that really should give us pause to make sure that our data and the privacy and the data that is out there in 5G is not available to those who can manipulate it or sabotage it or spy on it. So that's why it's important for us to look at and to encourage countries to join with us in this clean path. We call it the Clean Path Initiative.
أنا سعادة السفيرة شاكر لك على هذا اللقاء اللي كان جميل جدا وعلى صراحتك، وأتمنى أن تكون هناك في لقاءات أخرى، وأتمنى لك إقامة سعيدة في دولة الكويت في وطنك الكويت. شكرا لك سعادة السفيرة.
Well, thank you, Mohammed. It's been a pleasure for me to be on your show and to talk about, I think, issues that are really important between the United States and Kuwait. As I said, we have a very long and deep relationship that we want to grow and expand. We have worked together well in the COVID, unexpectedly in the COVID pandemic, and in a very positive way. And I think we have a lot of good things that go on in our relationship that we want to deepen and continue. So thank you.
Thank you very much. شكرا سعادة السفيرة.
Thanks.
أعزائي المشاهدين، وصلنا لنهاية برنامج ديوان الملا. نشوفكم في حلقة أخرى. مع السلامة.